Part 63. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 629. This scene seems very funny, but within the funniness, there is a great horror hidden inside. You know, everyone here is not an ordinary tomb robber, they are senior listeners. Even in this environment, everyone's strength has been weakened by the formation, but they are still senior after all. At the moment, 10 faceless men in white clothes stood behind each senior person, while the others were unaware of it. All the sounds around them completely disappeared at this time, leaving only an old sound. The sense of déjà vu in a behind-the-scenes movie. Boom. Subai only felt that his body was hit hard, and then the surrounding scenes became completely clear. The faceless people in white clothes holding lanterns also disappeared, and his whole body flew up in the air and was hit hard. On the wall behind him. Puff. A stream of blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. Hiss. Subai shook his head and put one hand on the ground. Obviously, he couldn't understand what happened just now. Did he see it wrong or what happened? At this time, Subai saw clearly that in front of him, the Western bald man was severely suppressed by everyone, but he was still resisting, relying on the brute strength strengthened by the barbarians. It was difficult for the other seniors to hold him down. Of course, this is also because those senior people are not the main ones to strengthen the physical body. The monk quickly ran to Subai, stretched out his hand to check Subai's injuries, and asked, "Is there nothing wrong?" Subai clutched his chest and shook his head gently, saying that he was fine. "What's going on? That guy suddenly went crazy just now. He first punched Tang Genkuo next to him, and then rushed directly into you. Why were you in a daze just now?" Subai slowly stood up and saw Tang Genkuo lying on the side with blood on his face. Although he was not in danger of life, several teeth were probably broken. From the monk's perspective, Tang Genkuo was studying the coffin with the bolt facing down, so it made sense that he was accidentally attacked by the bald man. But then when the bald man rushed directly towards Subai, it's completely unreasonable to stand there motionless, so stunned at this moment. And even if you are stunned, the instinct of the audience should still be there, right? Gently wipe the blood stains from the corner of his mouth. "Why is this guy crazy?" Subai asked. "I don't know why, but you have to tell this poor monk what happened to you just now." The monk looked at Subai seriously. Obviously, the monk still didn't believe that Subai just happened to be distracted. This was not logical at all. "Ha, I just saw a man in white clothes standing behind each of you, holding a lantern in his hand. The light of the lantern is green." Subai took a deep breath, and then spit it out heavily. Because he suddenly thought of the feeling he had before. "Monk, actually, it was me who might have gone crazy just now, but I overcame it and became him." Subai pointed at the bald man who was subdued by everyone. "Just now, I felt a terrible despair and loneliness. I almost collapsed without food or shelter. You can't stay in this place for a long time, otherwise one after another may go crazy," Subai reminded. The monk nodded. But the real altar is in front. This coffin must not be opened, otherwise all of us may be blamed here. In fact, the audience can clearly distinguish which is more serious, but people's greed cannot be stopped. But now the bald man's sudden madness is equivalent to pouring cold water on everyone. If the things here can be moved at will, why do those big-name listeners who came in and out of here still leave these things here? The bald man was subdued by everyone. The strength of everyone here has been basically weakened, but at least the strength level of low-level listeners is still retained. Of course, in this case, the listeners who focus on strengthening the physical body are more popular, because the strength of your physical body is here. Your bloodline power, your spell power, etc. These externally stimulated powers will be weakened by this invisible formation, but the strength and quality of your physical body are here. There is no way to change something. Therefore, Everyone couldn't help but secretly rejoice that the bald man had just bumped into Subai, a person who also focused on strengthening the physical body. Otherwise, if he had suffered such a collision, even if he was lucky enough to survive, it would have been absolutely impossible. Seriously injured and incapacitated. His mind is in a state of unconsciousness. Now we have to either send him out or let him fall into a deep sleep, a senior audience member said. He took out a silver needle in his hand and pierced the bald man's head directly. But the silver needle only went in a small part, and the rest couldn't be inserted, while the bald man continued to roar. This roaring sound kept echoing in the empty area, giving people a numb feeling. The monk walked over and placed his palm on the back of the other person's neck. Then he was shaken violently. The bald man rolled his eyes. Then another senior man's silver needle penetrated in. The bald man's body trembled and he fell asleep. Maria stood aside and watched the actions of these people. The bald man was her teammate, so she naturally couldn't let it go. But now the bald man was indeed crazy, and she couldn't stop the people around him from falling into a deep sleep, otherwise this time the action basically couldn't go on. You can't stay here for long. Keep going forward. It's just ahead. It's almost here at this time. Tang Genkuo stood up with the help of a person beside him. His words were a little leaky now. It was true that several teeth were broken. Naturally, everyone did not dare to stay here for a long time. Maria carried the bald man on her back alone and continued walking in with the others. There was nothing she could do if she didn't carry it. The other Chinese people here were too lazy to carry this heavy thing. A big guy with body odor. I guess everyone would like this guy to stay here and die inexplicably. Really? It's right in front. Not long after walking, an altar appeared in front of everyone. The altar was not very high, and even seemed a little too small. At least now, it seemed that it did not match the formation here and the 12 coffins outside. There is a stone chopping board placed in the center of the altar, and a jade box is placed on the chopping board. Jade can transmit light, so in the jade box, you can see a cube-shaped yellow thing emitting a faint light. It seems like a seal. This is the gold seal of the Dian Kingdom, Tang Genkuo said excitedly. This is the real, authentic gold seal of the Dian Kingdom. Most of the people present did not know what the Dian Kingdom golden seal was, but they all knew that it was a good thing. It was definitely a top-notch magic weapon, even better than everyone expected. However, there were, having learned from the past, no one dared to take the initiative to walk up to the altar, even though the altar was not very high. By judging others by oneself, everyone knows what kind of virtue they are, and naturally they also understand what kind of virtue those boss-level listeners have. If there are really good things that can be taken, can they stay? Not to mention those big shot listeners have all become advanced pace setters in protecting cultural relics. Can I go up? Zhu Sunfei asked. No one answered him, but many people glanced at him, meaning that if you have the courage, you can go up and try it first. What's behind the altar? Subai asked the monk. Behind the altar, it was pitch black, but as you can imagine, it was a huge hollow space. The poor monk, I don't know. What about that thing you're looking for that sucks people's energy everywhere? Subai shrugged. Not at home. Ahem. The monk coughed. Maybe he doesn't dare to come out. I don't think so. Subai raised his head and looked at the golden seal of the Dian Kingdom. If I were it, I would really like someone to come in and play with me. As soon as he finished speaking, a baby's cry suddenly sounded. Then at that moment, all the fireflies that were used for lighting died in an instant, and the surrounding area fell into a dense and suffocating darkness. Everyone took out their magic weapons. Even in this place, the strength of themselves and others will be greatly weakened, but they still have the confidence and ability to protect themselves. At least, that's the case for now. A hand suddenly placed on Subai's shoulder. That hand was very cold. Subai frowned. turned around immediately, and reached out to grab it, but found nothing. There was no one behind him. The feeling in that hand disappeared immediately. Wow! Another cry similar to that of a baby came, and then the smell of blood began to fill the air. Light will always shine on the world. Maria took out a light scroll, and a light purification magic was immediately released. In an instant, the darkness seemed to be dispelled, along with the terrifying gloom that had just been brought to everyone. However, soon, everyone saw Zhu Sunfei lying on the ground. His stomach was penetrated directly, all the intestines and organs inside flowed out, and his whole body had been eaten beyond recognition. "What is it?" Maria asked in shock when she saw the scene in front of her. "It looks like a cat scratched it." Tang Zhenqiu analyzed the wound and said. "Cat? Cat scratched?" Subai seemed to think of something immediately. The two babies crying just now were not the sounds of babies, but cat meows. Immediately, Subai stood up and rushed to the altar. Everyone felt a little incredible. The monk wanted to dissuade Subai but failed in time. An unknown and terrifying killer hidden in the darkness was watching, and everyone did not understand. Why did Subai suddenly run up to the altar? When Subai stood on the top of the altar, everything in front of me suddenly turned from darkness to clarity. Ahead, it was an underground river filled with yellow water. Densely packed corpses were floating on both sides of the river and in the river, and there were many more corpses hanging on the cliff across the river. No wonder I had a familiar feeling before. This scene. I have seen it in Jixiang's eyes before. Exactly the same picture. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 630. I still remember the first time I met Jixiang, at the express station run by Brother Ju. At that time, Subai was sitting in the car, while Jixiang was quietly sitting in his passenger seat. That time he looked directly at when Subai saw the auspicious eyes, his whole mind seemed to be trapped in it. What he saw was a yellow river. There were densely packed corpses in and on both sides of the river, like a scene like a netherworld. But Subai never thought that the scene actually existed. At this moment, it appeared in front of him. That cat. Are they the auspicious kind? Auspiciousness also comes from here? Was it brought out by Li-Chi? No, it shouldn't be, and it's impossible. When he was placed in the glass culture container, Jixiang had already appeared in front of him, flipping the scroll in front of him. What is certain now is that auspiciousness is related to blood corpses and leeches. So, at the beginning, at least for now, the oldest one should be the time when he was with his parents. In other words, it was very big. Maybe Jixiang was brought out of this place more than 20 years ago by his cheap dad. But, looking back, standing on the altar which was not very high, Subai looked down at Zhu Sunfei who was lying in a pool of blood and completely dead. That aloof Jixiang, that Jixiang that likes to let little guys sleep next to it, that Jixiang that only brings milk to little guys, is it really the same kind of creature here? For a moment, Subai couldn't accept it. At the same time, Subai also understood what the feeling of the hand on his body that he had felt before was. It should be a cat's paw, but when he turned around quickly, he grabbed it empty. Because the cat was probably suspended in the air, it couldn't catch the human body in front of him. Because human thinking is extensible, when you feel a hand on your shoulder, you will subconsciously think that there should be a person standing behind you. When you think of hands, you will definitely think of people, like Lu Sun said that when he sees a woman's thighs, he thinks of that. Now that means, are there any auspicious companions here? And those companions were obviously not very friendly. However, since Jixiang has returned to his old place, can he not remember this place? This made Subai very suspicious, but there was nothing he could do about it. There were obviously many secrets in that cat, and it obviously knew many secrets, but it was unwilling to tell them, and Subai couldn't give it a pair of pliers. pry open. Perhaps, this relationship is maintained in a tacit understanding between one person and one cat. But obviously, this place belongs to Jixiang's kind. They are not as good-tempered as Jixiang. Of course, Subai doesn't think Jixiang has a good temper. When the ghost boy in red floated over to give him the door card, he was directly hit by Jixiang. If you slap him to death, the end result will be your soul completely destroyed. Also, how can a cat living here have a good temper? Subai didn't even look at the jade box on the desk, because he knew that it was not something he could take a look at. It was so conspicuous that the big-name audience who came in and out of here before could not see it unless they were blind. But they didn't take it away, which meant it was indeed hot. Below, there are 10 listeners, one of whom has fainted, and the other has been basically dismembered. In other words, there are only 8 people below who are still able to move. The people below looked at Zhu Sunfei, who was dismembered, and then at Subai, who dared to stand on the top of the altar. A companion had just been dismembered in such a tragic way next to him. This made it difficult for the others to accept it for a while, because they knew that they might have become this target, and when this bad luck befell them, I guess there is nothing I can do to resist. After all, although there is a gap in everyone's strength, it is really not to the point where they can crush and kill another person instantly. The light from the light scroll was slowly extinguishing, and darkness seemed to be covering her again. Everyone turned their attention to Maria. Maria had already put the bald man on the ground before. At this time, she had no intention of saying that she must protect her unconscious companion. After all, it was too late to protect herself. I only have this light scroll with me. After all, light scrolls are actually relatively useless. I can't bring many, Maria said sincerely, because she knew that she must be sincere at this time, and the others also knowing that there is no need for Maria to lie at this time. After all, when darkness comes next time, Maria herself may become the next target of tragic death. Whether they were at the 12 coffins or under the altar, everyone felt a more fragile feeling than in the story world, because your death and your madness are completely random. Perhaps, only Subai and the monk knew that Subai was the first one to be hit by the coffin that time, but Subai was able to survive it because of his own special characteristics. What are we looking for here? A senior man obviously lost his composure. Are we just here for archaeology? Tang Genkuo glared at him and said, there are many things here. As long as you can experience them carefully, you will be able to gain great feelings and improvements. I just want to live now. We have to get out of here now, as soon as possible. This audience member was obviously quite angry, because although everyone had assessed the risk factor beforehand, no one expected that there would be such a thing standing next to you. A situation in which a companion is suddenly massacred. Haha. Subai touched the cigarettes in his pocket, took out one, bit it in his mouth, and then took out a lighter. On the steps, I sat down. Listening to the noise of the people below, some people want to continue exploring here for a while, because even a very ordinary stone sculpture here has a natural formation or rune atmosphere, which is indeed a priceless treasure. And half of them want to leave now. Want to leave? Subai whispered to himself. It's finally quiet now that the guests have arrived. How could they let you go? Subai could still see clearly. Now it was no longer a matter of leaving if he wanted to. Snapped. When Subai lit the lighter, the light suddenly disappeared completely. Even the sparks of the lighter appeared green and faint, bringing out no light at all. Darkness invades again. Meow. This time, a cat meowing similar to a baby's cry sounded again. Subai was sitting here, and he could sense the panic of those under the altar, which probably included the monk, because the monk didn't know what he was encountering. He took a breath and slowly exhaled a mouthful of cigarette ashes. Unfortunately, it was night now, otherwise Subai would have really wanted someone to take a camera and take a picture of himself at this moment. The theme was a smoker walking on the edge of darkness and death. This picture should be quite artistic. Then, because Sudbai naturally placed the hand holding the cigarette on his knees, he saw a pair of eyes with a slight green-amber glow slowly appearing in front of his cigarette butt. It can only be seen from such a close position to Sudbai, and the group of people below cannot be seen. This pair of eyes has a strange and captivating ability, as if it can make you fall into it. It will arouse the fear in your heart, and then pull your whole body into its thinking. It is conceivable why Zhu Sunfei was dismembered and killed in a short period of time without even making any resistance. It is estimated that at that time, he was actually hypnotized. However, when facing these eyes, what came to Sudbai's mind was auspiciousness. The black cat who had been extremely aloof from the first time they met, the black cat who had taken him to a haunted house to find blood beads for himself, who had just become a vampire, the black cat who had taken care of his children as a nanny for him. Guy's black cat. The fear in people's hearts comes from the unknown. The unknown is the most terrifying existence for any intelligent life. It is precisely because of the fear of the unknown that theology was born, and it is also because of the fear of the unknown that people burned Bruno, who promoted heliocentric theory, to death in the Campo dei Fiori. When you are no longer unknown, it seems that he is no longer so afraid. At this time, Sudbai had such a mentality. He admitted that these auspicious similar creatures were very scary, but he was really not that scared. When these deep amber eyes stared at him, Sudbai stretched out his hand and leaned forward. It was very likely that he would be killed by this cat in the next moment, because to a certain extent, Zhu Sunfei actually, although Sudbai was taking the route of physical strengthening, no matter how confident he was in his body, he still didn't have much confidence in resisting the cat's attack. But the expected attack did not happen. On the contrary, Sudbai's palm touched a soft and furry thing, which was the cat's head. "That's great," Sudbai said. "Ah!" Below, there was a scream. It was the scream of a man. It should be that another person was attacked, but this person seemed to be better than Zhu Sunfei. At least he could still scream, and he could still make a sound, but look, the extent of his screams already heralded the end of his life. The darkness is still going on, and it seems that the people below have not found a way to find the light yet, but here in Sudbai, this cat still continues to stare at Sudbai. And Sudbai. He also stroked the cat's head slowly and repeatedly. This feeling. It's like kissing death. Well, it's an artistic approach. In fact, to put it in a more popular and more appropriate way, it's a bit like having sex with a girl who you know has AIDS without a condom. This description. It seems more relevant. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 631. Amitabha. A Buddha chant sounded, and a Buddhist bead floated in front of the monk, emitting a soft and upright light, illuminating the place again. Sudbai knew clearly that there was a relic hidden in this Buddhist bead, which was the monk's secret at the bottom of the box. Device. When the light came back again, the feeling of darkness and suffocation subsided, and another person died at the scene. It was the Yunnan local veteran who had just decided to leave. There was almost no intact skin on his body. It would not be accurate to say that the skin was torn apart, because the wounds showed a casual yet orderly appearance. Arrangement. The fatal injury should be the big hole in his chest, which completely penetrated his body, and all the organs in his body were almost smashed into pulp. The death was so miserable that even the well-informed listeners around him found it a little unbearable. After all, the rabbit dies and the fox dies. There was still a small part of the cigarette in Sudbai's hand. He put it to his mouth, took another puff, then shook the ashes, and the smoke puffed out gently from his nostrils. At this time, he seemed to be a spectator, but Sudbai himself also clearly, in fact, I was involved in it every time. The first time I was at the coffin, it was because of my own specialness that I carried it without going crazy. If I hadn't carried it, I looked at the bald head lying on the ground. Man, Subai is not sure whether the monk will always carry him to protect him. Maybe he will, but he is not sure. The second and third time, he first felt the cat's paws on his shoulders and then looked into the eyes of the cat. In fact, he was wandering on the edge of life and death. Now, what Subai was thinking about was the reason why he didn't die the second and third time because of the auspicious smell on his body. Subai remembered that cats seemed to like to put eye droppings or hair on people because it would make them feel more comfortable. However, Jixiang didn't seem to have this habit. The cold and aloof cat seemed to be more gentle when dealing with the little guy. Treat everyone else with a dismissive attitude. At this time, Tang Zhenqiu didn't even care to look at his dead companions. Instead, he quickly walked up to the altar, and all the audience members, including the monks, followed suit. This is their ultimate purpose here. As for the dead, let them die. Dead Taoists are not dead Taoists. As long as you are still alive, you have to treat yourself as a living person. The monk's relic is still suspended, and it seems that it should be able to sustain it for a long time. Maria even left the bald man down and came up. As for whether she would pick him up again, no one knew. Even if she chose not to care about him in the end, there was nothing wrong with her. The top of the altar is more like a viewing platform. Generally, there will be such a setting in the Mingchuan Mountain scenic area to facilitate tourists to come here to enjoy the scenery. But it was obvious that these people were just stunned by the scenery they saw, and then began to copy the carvings on the top. Subai was not interested in this. He didn't understand the formation, and it was useless to read it. But now Subai was thinking in his heart, what on earth was absorbing the energy of the village outside? Even taking the initiative to go out for food? It shouldn't be these black cats, because these black cats are too powerful and there is no need for them to do this. So what could it be? The body lying in the coffin? It seems that there is no need to do so. Putting an empty coffin there can give a senior person a kind of scalp-numbing pressure. If the person inside is born, it will definitely be a battle of thousands of miles away from the Red Land. It is absolutely impossible. So petty. With cats and coffin occupants ruled out, what options are left? Yao Zhe, did he really not come in? Subai looked at the two corpses and the unconscious bald man below. Why is the target just the two of them? When the rest of the people were at the top of the altar, Subai walked down alone. The monk's relics were only illuminated within a limited range. He discovered that Subai was acting out of his own way again, but he couldn't follow Subai. Maybe, the monk can also sense that Subai seems to have a special familiarity with this place. Subai squatted in front of Zhu Sunfei and reached out to grope around Zhu Sunfei's body. The other people above thought that Subai was groping for Zhu Sunfei's magic weapon to make money, so they secretly criticized Subai's selfishness and lower limits. But only Subai knew what he was looking for. Sure enough, Zhu Sunfei felt a hard object in his pocket. He took it out and saw that it was a stone. This stone? Subai closed his eyes, and all the journeys and pictures since entering here began to appear in his mind. Then, he finally thought of where the stone came from. It was part of the chassis of the humanoid stone sculpture. Zhu Sunfei actually pulled this stone, cut it off and put it in his pocket. Is there anything special about this stone? Or maybe those black cats regarded Zhu Sunfei as their hunting target because of his actions. Subai exerted a little force on his palm, and the stone slowly dented, but when Subai removed the force from his palm, the stone slowly returned to its original shape. No, this is not stone, this is another special material. Subai licked his lips and touched the second dead senior listener. An identical stone also appeared on this listener's body. Taking a deep breath, Subai began to relax his thinking. He had already made a preconceived and erroneous thought before. This time, he could no longer be preconceived. Two people deliberately broke off a stone under a sculpture and put it in their pockets? How dare you play this trick when you know that this is not a friendly place? No, no. Subai shook his head slightly and changed his mind. Or did the cat deliberately place stones on them after killing these two men? So what is the stone used for? Subai now found that it seemed that he and others had made a wrong decision by entering this place. The secrets of this place were not even accessible to the powerful class of seniors. It was purely a gambler's game for everyone to come in. Oshiage psychology is at work. Soon, Subai thought of another idea, that is, cats killed people. Is it impossible? Cats also put stones there? Both stones were held in Subai's palms. Suddenly, a sticky liquid infiltrated into the stones. Subai's hands were quickly covered with a layer of black dragon scales, and two wisps of green smoke immediately rose from Subai's palms. Then, there was a stench. The stone also began to soften rapidly, and countless densely packed green bugs turned into ashes in the struggle. This is not a stone, these are two worms. Subai suddenly raised his head and looked around. There are such stones everywhere here, walls, sculptures, steps, etc. Most of them are made of this kind of stone. Is it possible? Is this a bug nest? But the brilliance of the relic can only last for 5 minutes, the monk said. Subai clapped his hands and stood up. He did not tell anyone else what he had discovered. Instead, he put his hands in his trouser pockets. To be honest, this was really a dark satire. The object of satire, the low one, refers to this. A group of senior listeners, they are all looking for opportunities for themselves. The high level refers to broadcasting. There are supernatural evil things that suck people's energy and they don't announce the solution of real tasks. Now, it is the mentally ill person like myself who seems to be most concerned about this matter. Could it be that after becoming a father, my heart really softened a lot? However, thinking about the little guy, and the row of new tombstones when he entered the village, as well as the faces of young children on the tombstones, Subai suddenly felt a little heavy in his heart. Jixiang comes from here. At first, he was probably brought out by his cheap father. Since Jixiang is called Jixiang, is there also a black cat named Ruyi? For a moment, Subai couldn't help but smile. How long had it been, and he was still thinking about this. Click. A crisp sound came. Subai raised his head, and then he found that everyone on the altar had stopped their movements and looked at the unknown in the middle, where Tang Genkuo was holding the jade box with an expression of obsession. Tang Genkuo's face was full of obsession, with a hysterical attitude, desperate and at all costs, he had fallen into a demonic disease. In a daze, Subai seemed to be able to picture a scene in his mind. At this time, a faceless man in white clothes was standing behind Tang Genkuo, holding a lantern emitting green light in his hand. Old Tang, put it down quickly. Stop it, Old Tang. Everyone shouted Tang Genkuo's name together. The devil, more than one devil, surrounds everyone. Every once in a while, someone will go crazy or die. This is actually not an area that experienced people can set foot in, but since I came here without knowing my capabilities, I can only admit defeat one after another. While my companions are dying, I can copy more things and gain more insights. Some things are also excellent. The most essential aspect of the audience's ecosystem is completely revealed at this time. Tang Genkuo picked up the jade box and then, Tang Genkuo's entire body began to melt and turned into a pile of green foamy mucus, while the jade box returned to its position firmly and returned to the distance. At the same time, the relic in the monk's hand seemed to be disturbed by something. The light began to tremble, and the brightness and width of the illumination suddenly shrank greatly. It could barely reach Subai's side. Now Subai was suddenly overwhelmed by darkness. Puff. Subai felt a sudden chill on his neck, and then an extremely sharp gash appeared on his neck. Depend on. Meow. A cat meowed from behind Subai. Is it my turn? As one wishes. What are you doing? Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 632. The coldness around his neck made Subai feel a panic that he hadn't seen for a long time. At this moment, Subai suddenly realized that he was not special, and death would also come to him. The cat's claws were much sharper than he imagined. Originally, Subai was quite confident in his body, but now, he suddenly felt that his body was made of paper. Fragile. And myself. It is indeed not a special one. It touched your shoulder. It really looked at you. But this does not prevent it from choosing to attack you again, nor does it prevent it from killing you when it wants to. Wow. Subai felt that his lower abdomen seemed to have been cut open, and his body fell backward subconsciously. Time seemed to slow down at this moment. Perhaps it was because the cat was so fast. Some people gave Subai this illusion. Boom. Subai fell to the ground. He felt that he was hit by several more claws, but he couldn't even catch the opponent's figure. This was a kind of crushing and a kind of despair. Subai had never laughed at the death of Zhu Sunfei's two seniors before, because in such a rapid and short-term situation, Zhu Sunfei died quietly, and the other one at least let out a scream, but it had already been explained. The existence that attacks them can completely crush them. This point also applies to Subai. Now it seems. Entering here is really an act of overestimating one's ability. Even the big-name audience will not destroy every plant and tree here when entering here. My cheap father, who is so shameless and has no lower limit, may just bring it with him. Jixiang left here and didn't touch anything else here. So, what about the 11 of him now? It's really like rushing here to die. Blood splattered on the ground. It was instantly absorbed by the ground. My Buddha is compassionate. A Buddhist chant sounded, and the relic flew over immediately. The light illuminated Subai's place, and Subai only saw a black shadow that passed quickly and then disappeared. The monk ran down quickly and came to Subai's side. Looking at the horrific wounds on Subai's body, he frowned and said, "Originally, the poor monk thought you had discovered something special here that could avoid." A wry smile appeared on Subai's face. "I originally thought so." Yes, Subai was a little lucky, but now, no more, because if the monk had been just one step later, he might be as dead as Zhu Sunfei and the others before him. Death is indeed indiscriminate, and no one has special qualifications here. Although the wounds were healing, Subai's face began to turn pale. These wounds had an extremely sharp aura remaining, making it more difficult to heal and consuming more power within the body. Of course, and a more important reason is that all the blood Subai just lost was absorbed by the ground, so there is no way to take it back. The monk also discovered this and said, "Why is your blood sucked into the ground?" Zhu Sunfei had previously seen another senior's blood splattered on the ground, but no such scene occurred. Subai shook his head. "I don't know, maybe my blood is special." "Monk, let's leave here. Nearly half of the people are dead. If we don't leave, we may have to explain everything here. Here, there is no way. It's not an area that people of our level should get involved in." "Haha, you will be afraid too," the monk laughed at this time. "It's not that I'm afraid, it's that I think there's no point in dying here." Because the monk came down to look for Subai with the relics, the audience who were on the altar immediately ran down. There were many people standing around. Subai stood up with the help of the monk. "Let's go, copy everything that needs to be copied, and understand everything that needs to be understood." The monk looked around the crowd and said. In fact, there was one thing he didn't say, that is, enough damn people have died. 3 senior people have died directly, one is now crazy and in a coma, and one is seriously injured. At this time, the team of 11 people has lost less than half of its vitality. If they stay any longer, then it is very likely that the group was destroyed. Senior people, even in the audience circle, can be called adults by low-level listeners and ordinary listeners, but here, their lives seem extremely cheap, so cheap that they themselves cannot accept it. This time, no one insists on anything anymore. Leaving is a common choice for everyone. Being able to leave here alive is considered very lucky compared to the dead companions. The light of the relics continued to shine. It was not until everyone left the altar and returned to the 12 coffins that the monk put the relics away. Once they arrived at this place, they should be out of the monster's control area. Of course, the coffin here is actually not very safe. Sudbai's eyes once again fell on the coffin with the bolt facing down. According to the deceased Tang Genkuo, there should be an owner in that coffin. But now, no one has the courage to mention things like opening the coffin anymore, so Maria just honestly carries the bald man on her back and follows everyone out. However, it seems that whatever you are afraid of will come. When everyone just passed by the coffin with the handle facing down, the handle of the coffin suddenly made a crisp sound. Click. The bolt began to slowly turn upwards, and at the same time, the thick bronze coffin lid also slowly rose up at this time, and wisps of thick and almost substantial corpse ore turned into a water-like state and dripped. Come out. Everyone immediately didn't dare to move. No one dared to move. Not that no one thought about closing their eyes and running away quickly, but no one dared to move, because the moment they turned the bolt upward, an extremely powerful force came out. The energy was released from the coffin and locked onto everyone present. This is a warning, a declaration, a condescending sentence. Boom. 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 The coffin lid kept floating upward, and a figure appeared inside. The monk supported Sudbai. At this moment, Sudbai could feel the monk's aura becoming thicker. Obviously, in this situation, even the monk who was most particular about his state of mind could no longer maintain his composure. When the blood corpse appeared, it directly slaughtered the entire audience of veterans and above in Shaanxi. But the person in front of me, judging from the appearance and the aura he is showing now, is definitely no worse than the blood corpse, and even vaguely, the time is even more than that of a blood corpse. The figure looked a little stout and obviously a bloated person. This made Sudbai's mind immediately think of the fat official on the far left in the photo. More than 20 years ago, my cheap dad came here with the bloated official and Master Huaneng. My cheap dad left here with Jixiang. Master Huaneng also left here later, and only this bloated one. There seems to be no news about the official. It is said that he died in a car accident. Su Yuhang, is it you, are you here? The other party's voice seemed very deep, with a special hoarse feeling. Su Yuhang. It's the name of Sudbai's cheap dad. The monk immediately glanced at Sudbai. Apparently, the monk understood why Sudbai's blood was absorbed by the ground. The entire space here is actually a building that is invisible to the naked eye and is made up of tiny insects. However, the entire building is actually alive. Sudbai's large pieces of blood spilled down and were absorbed by the ground, just like computer chips. As well as nearby circuits, the information was transmitted. It has reached the occupants of this coffin. Su Yuhang, answer my question. The other party asked again. The rest of the audience present looked at each other in confusion. Damn. Who is Su Yuhang? Who is Su Yuhang here? The hand in the shadow slowly stretched out and pointed towards Sudbai. Sudbai's body immediately seemed to be frozen, floating, and was slowly and forcibly moved to the coffin. This is a terrifying power that can control and ignore your own consciousness. Even the blood corpse did not bring Sudbai this kind of irresistible despair. The shadow waited until Sudbai was pulled closer. There was a cry of surprise. You are not Su Yuhang, but, oh, you are his bloodline, ha ha. The man in the shadow let out a sigh, as if a heavy hammer hit everyone's heart. Every word and deed of the other party can directly affect your own state of mind. When the other party wakes up, he will be the absolute center of this area. You stay, accompany me, the rest, get out. The chi that was originally locked on everyone completely disappeared. All the audience except the monks quickly left here. The control on Sudbai also disappeared, but the only remaining chi was still locked on Sudbai. Sudbai looked at the monk, with a wry smile on his face. Monk, let's go. Amitabha, with your words, this poor monk can walk away with peace of mind. The monk immediately turned around and left with the others. Sudbai didn't leave because he knew he couldn't leave. At this time, the coffin lid slowly closed again. Suyuhang lied to me, and made me sleep all the time, sleeping here, except when I enter the world of stories, I just lie here. Now, you come and accompany me, you are his test subject, he will come to you. Then what should I eat? Sudbai asked helplessly. I will regularly emit zombie energy, you are also a zombie, you will never die of hunger. Sudbai. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 633. Sometimes, the development of things is really beyond everyone's expectation. For example, the reason why Sudbai came here was just to do a favor for the monk, but he didn't expect that this place would be so dangerous. He was almost killed by Jixiang's kind. Kill. As for Ruyi, Sudbai didn't know if it was the name of the black cat, but thinking that since Jixiang was called Jixiang, and the other one was called Ruyi, it seemed a lot more appropriate, but Ruyi didn't go with what I wanted, and also, almost killed myself. But now, Sudbai faced a situation that was more unacceptable to Sudbai than killing himself. The old man in the coffin actually wanted to let him live here with him. The blame for this matter can only be shouldered by the monk. Sudbai finally signaled the monk to leave, because even if the monk stayed here and continued to fight hard, it would be of no use. Moreover, Sudbai also believed that the monk's moment of hesitation had no effect at all. It will not affect the monk's decision to turn around and leave. The monk is definitely very realistic and practical. I just hope that the monk can help me take care of the little one after he goes out. Now his father can only stay with this pervert for a while in this place that is not an ancient tomb but is better than an ancient tomb. Of course, according to the old man in the coffin, he has been lying in the coffin except when he entered the story world. This may have been more than 20 years. In addition to the story world, his real world life is sleeping in this coffin. Sudbai didn't know what kind of place this place was. Maybe the person lying in the coffin didn't know either. Even his cheap dad didn't know. There were really many secrets in this place. But at least, now Sudbai knows something that he had already guessed, that is, he does have the blood of that man and woman. The man and woman must have found a surrogate to give birth to him, just to produce an experiment. Just a product. Sudbai leaned against the side of the coffin, spinning the lighter in his hand. After the monks and the others left, streaks of white light flashed across the entrance. This should be the effect of the formation. Although Sudbai did not know the formation, he could generally do it. I guessed that the entrance to the formation must have been changed. It should still be in Dali, but it may not be at its original location. Okay, now he really has to go to jail. Now Sudbai's only hope is that the broadcaster will be kind when he transfers himself to the story world and then returns him to the real world, so as not to let himself come back here again. But obviously, there is a high probability that the broadcast will continue to transmit itself back here and into this dark place. After all, there is actually no real danger here. This is the most depressing place for Sudbai, because you really won't starve to death here, because the coffin releases an extremely pure corpse energy every day, which is just enough for Sudbai to absorb and stay alive. Without giving any, there is no way that Sudbai can take this opportunity to improve his strength. It can be said that he is very stingy. This is prison, but the cell leader sleeps in the coffin, and Subai, as a prisoner, stays outside and has a certain degree of freedom, but this degree of freedom is indeed meaningless. Except for the first day, when Subai silently calculated the time in his mind, Subai slowly forgot about time in the following days. He only knew that it was the 15th time that he had absorbed the corpse energy emitted by the other party. Probably, half a month has passed. Subai didn't know whether the monk had taken the little guy back to Shanghai. Now he was basically isolated from the outside world. Here, in addition to despair, there seems to be despair. Besides loneliness, there is still loneliness. After taking out the last cigarette, Subai bit his lip. On the first day he stayed here, Subai began to save his cigarettes, 1 cigarette a day and never smoke more, but this was already the last one. Light it up and take a deep breath. Grass. Subai cursed. I have almost finished my cigarettes, and I am living on corpse gas every day. No alcohol, no sunshine, no entertainment, only corpse gas, corpse gas, corpse gas. Gritting his teeth, Subai reached out and knocked on the coffin behind him. Dong, dong, dong. You're being unreasonable. That guy Suyuhang has tricked you. There's no need for you to leave me here too. There was still no response from the coffin. Subai was used to it. In the past half-month, the other party had not said a word to him except exuding some corpse energy to him every day. Sitting in this prison is indeed too insignificant. Standing up, Subai walked to the altar in a familiar way. On the 4th day, Subai came here again. The black cat did not attack him again. It seemed to have acquiesced in his existence. Of course, it should be for the sake of the residents in that coffin. Subai no longer was nervous at the beginning and became very casual. To be honest, the space here is actually quite large. Subai still doesn't know what kind of place it is. Sitting on the altar, looking at the jade box placed on the desk, Subai did not touch it. The green pus on the ground had not completely faded away, and Tang Zhenqiu's bones were still cold. However, the corpses of Zhu Sunfei's 2 senior men had been eaten clean, but the blood was still there. I don't know if it was eaten by a cat or a nearby stone, but considering Jixiang's aloof demeanor, it's more likely that it was the latter. The vampire's eyes allow Subai to have more clarity in the dark night. Although he can't see very clearly, he can generally see the surrounding situation without any light, which is already very good. This time, Subai turned over and jumped from the altar. There are depressions on both sides of the Yellow River. Subai is standing on the depression now. This river is a return river, which means that it goes around here instead of just passing through here. Because Subai had seen a few more distinctive corpses in the river, and about an hour later, he could see those few more distinctive corpses floating past his eyes again. Subai sat down on a stone and put his hands on his knees. To be honest, even if he did not absorb the pure corpse energy released by the coffin every day, Subai would not really starve to death here. After all, here there were mountains of corpses, and the corpse energy was also very rich. Although it was a bit more muddled and complicated, Subai could still transform it on his own. He really wouldn't starve to death. But such a closed life really made Subai feel like his days were like years. Meow. A cat meow came from behind Subai. Subai turned around and saw a black cat standing on top of the altar, looking down at him. This black cat is really similar to Jixiang, but Jixiang's eyes are clearer than Jixiang's, and this black cat's eyes are not only fierce but also fierce. Subai waved to the black cat and motioned for him to come over. In the past half-month, Subai met this black cat no less than 8 times, but every time the cat looked at him from a distance and did not come close. Of course, he will never attack himself again like he did in the beginning. Closing it tightly can drive people crazy, especially in a cemetery similar to the living dead. Subai didn't know why the person in the coffin had to pull him to lock him in here. Moreover, Judging from what the other party said at the beginning, Subai seemed to be able to tell that the other party seemed to be constantly entering the story world to do tasks until now, but thinking about it, the interval between entering the story world should be longer. I was a listener more than 20 years ago and you are still doing tasks? Are you still entering the world of stories? Comparing it like this, it seems that he is a very well-behaved baby, not only compared to his cheap parents, but even compared to Li Ji and the others. Calculating it this way, it's no wonder that broadcasters would acquiesce in some of his extraordinary actions. However, until now, Subai has not found the thing that might go out to suck people's essence. It seems that the thing hasn't come back yet. A feeling of annoyance rose from the bottom of his heart. Half a month had completely worn out Subai's patience. He stood up and walked directly to the river. The black cat looking down at the altar had a suspicious look in its eyes. It was obvious that it didn't know why this weak human had the courage to continue walking forward, because it knew how dangerous this river was. Yes, this river is very dangerous, because when Subai jumped down and stood on the depression, he could feel the dead souls in the river constantly calling him and calling him. It was like a rural village. A very popular ghost story in adults will tell children not to play near the water, because there are drowned ghosts in the water, and they will drag you down with them to die. Subai just walked into the river. When half of his body was under the water, it seemed as if the corpses around him suddenly became alive. They smiled at Subai enthusiastically and invited Subai to come and sit down. It seemed very special. Enthusiasm, everything, is so beautiful. But at this moment, the coffin, which was silent except for the corpse aura every day, suddenly shook, and a sigh came from inside. Suyuhang, your son actually wants to seek death, haha, it's really not that good, that's right, he is just your test subject. Subai's body slowly relaxed, and he began to drift with the current. He began to float on the water, sometimes rising up, and sometimes his whole body was submerged again. In a trance. When I was in the water, I looked at both sides of the river bank with some confusion. You can vaguely see it? There were dense crowds of people in white clothes standing on both sides. Each of them was holding a green lantern in their hands, as if they were saying goodbye and guiding the way. And they all have no face. Densely packed and neat. Can't see the edge. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 634. This half-month period was definitely a kind of torture more unbearable than being in jail, but Subai's actions now had some other meanings. It couldn't be said to be self-destruction, but it couldn't be said to be how good his mental state was now. Affirmation and positivity do not go hand in hand. However, the feeling of lying in the river now is really good, as if a person is immersed in the dreamy dizziness of poppies, knowing that this will make him sink, but he can't extricate himself, and he is too lazy to extricate himself. This feels good. Even, pretty good. This is the reason why many people choose to smoke that kind of thing and go to the point of no return. To put it more simply, there are many smokers in the world. Most people know that smoking is harmful to health. It is written on the outside of every cigarette box that smoking is harmful to health. But smokers still ignore this and continue to smoke. There are many things that we know are wrong, but many people still choose this way. Floating up and down in the river feels like the ups and downs of life. This is just a kind of emotion, because now Subai only has emotion to do. His originally strong mental state has deteriorated in this half-month. Basically, he has been worn out. After all, this is not an ordinary prison. Every day he stays here is a kind of physical and mental torture. Even if his mind is as tough as iron, he is tortured until his fingers are soft. People always need to choose to indulge, and they cannot always maintain a sober and rational state. After all, people are not machines and need to rest and relax. While in the river, through the turbid water, Subai saw a dense group of people in white standing on both sides of the river. This was a sight that could make one's scalp numb, but now that Subai looked like it didn't matter. Love whoever you want, I don't care about this damn place, no matter how many secrets or mysteries you have. Gudu. 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 Subai sank lower and lower, and sunk lower and lower, which also meant that Subai sank deeper and deeper. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Calling out in confusion. Subai's eyes gradually became blurred, and everything in front of him became unreal. Around him, there were people dancing, singing, gambling, playing, and even expressing their sexual desire in the daytime. This is a world of indulgence, a country of wantonness, a wonderful place, and a place that makes people want to stop. Who can leave? Who is willing to leave? Who wants to leave? Even though I knew it was poison, I ate it willingly. There was no need to worry about the consequences, and there was no need to worry about gains and losses. Life. Finish. That's it? At least it seems nice to die in this way. Although this move is more like a kind of suicide, it is not bad to be able to commit suicide in such a beautiful way. In the river, corpses and skeletons kept clinging to Subai's body, densely packed, circle after circle, like a spider web, attracting many people and implicating many others. Everyone sinks together. Let's all dream together. Hello everyone. It's like a party that never ends. When a person has been depressed for a long time, he really needs this way to relieve his pressure, especially since Subai has no cigarettes and there are no women here. He can only choose self-destruction to complete the final pleasure. Because Subai could no longer hold on to enter the next story world, and he was unwilling to hold on. Probably due to the entry of new life, more and more corpses came to cling to Subai. Naturally, the circle began to sink deeper and deeper. Subai's body slowly began to decay, and traces of bones appeared in some places. This is normal. When your mind chooses to sink itself, your body will naturally slowly decay accordingly. This is a process that cannot be changed. The principle is the same as being blindfolded and cutting a wound on your wrist and then letting you listen to the sound of dripping water to scare yourself to death. However, as he went further and further down, Subai's eyes looked through the vast yellow water and saw something that seemed to be below. They are tombstones. A piece of very tall tombstones. The tombstones clearly bear the traces of time. After all, they are constantly being washed away by dirty river water, but the newness of the tombstones can also be clearly distinguished. The words engraved on the latest tombstone are much clearer. Lychee. These two words are clearly engraved on the tombstone. They are not as conventional as someone's tomb. They are just two words, simple and straightforward, and seem to fit the character of that woman very well. Her tombstone? She had been here before. Subai could understand and accept it. She could indeed come here and should come here because according to the records here, many big-name listeners had been here. But why are they here? Neither knows. But now, Subai clearly realized that the truth behind the big-shot audience coming here had been revealed in front of him. There are many tombstones here, at least in Subai's sight, there are almost 20, and there must be more. The latest one is left by Lychee. Bang dang. For some unknown reason, the water flow swirled and pushed Subai and the corpses clinging to him deeper, like a big dandelion flying in the wind. He couldn't control himself at all. Dong dong dong. Because there are too many corpses, or perhaps because no new life has been added for too long, the old residents here are even more excited. They are eager to witness a new life sinking here, and they can experience the pleasure together. If you say that you have already sunk, then you hope that all living people will sink like them, otherwise they will be unbalanced in their hearts. But because there were so many clinging corpses, when they were tossed by the whirlpool, the scallop-like surface of this large corpse directly hit a tombstone below. In an instant, the huge spider web or scallop was smashed into pieces, and Sudbai's body also hit the tombstone, and then slowly slid down. His blood, his bones and flesh were constantly being separated, and it had reached the point where half his face was half his bones, but Sudbai still vaguely saw the sonorous inscriptions engraved on the tombstone he bumped into. 5 powerful words. The tomb of Suyuhang. Is it his tombstone? How could it be his tombstone? Sudbai suddenly felt so ironic, so ironic. When he was planning to indulge himself for the last time, he was actually destined to die on the tombstone of this man, a man of the same bloodline as himself, a guy he wanted to kill with his own hands. Do you want to be completely terminated under his tombstone? There was a trace of unwillingness in my heart, but this unwillingness seemed so insignificant in the almost irreversible sinking. Some things and some decisions, once made, cannot be changed. It is difficult to recover after overturning the water. This is this principle. Although I find it disgusting and ridiculing. But Sudbai also knew in his heart that he might really die relying on this tombstone. For the sake of their own experiments, this pair of men and women did not hesitate to use their own flesh and blood as test subjects that could be sacrificed and played with. So, have you also calculated that one of the test subjects will become your gravekeeper in the end? Really, waste recycling. A last angry growl came out of his throat, and Sudbai's fist hit the tombstone very weakly. Now of course, this little strength could not shake the stone monument at all, but at least it could allow Sudbai to vent his emotions before his death. Resentment. I thought I would die with the illusion of beauty and comfort, but in reality, I poured a lot of shit on myself before I died. This change is enough. However, this tombstone underwent a special change when Sudbai's flesh and blood impacted on it, and the words on it became brighter. At the same time, a phantom appeared in front of the tombstone. Sudbai recognized this phantom. After all, in his own memory, this figure had always belonged to his father. Of course, Sudbai now knew that his childhood memories basically came from in that picture. Suyuhang, leave a tombstone here to cut off the past, isolate the present, and block the future, in order to escape from cause and effect and achieve self-realization. Suddenly, this voice also reached Sudbai's ears. Now Sudbai finally understood why so many big-shot listeners came here. This seemed to be the place where they attained enlightenment and the place where they achieved a higher existence beyond being a high-level listener. The tombstones here are like seals. Leaving your own tombstone here represents a kind of self-determination, a kind of transformation, and a kind of rebirth. Is this where broadcasting acknowledges? Why did you choose here? Many questions were lingering in Sudbai's mind, but now he was unable to think about it, and he was too lazy to think about it. After all, he would sleep with this man's tombstone. This ending. In Sudbai's opinion, it was extremely bloody. However, the image of the man in the shadow did not completely disappear. He seemed to look back, with a hint of confusion in his eyes. Who is it? This is an image that records the tombstone left by Suyuhang here when he preached. Therefore, at that moment more than 20 years ago, he seemed to have sensed that someone would come to his tombstone more than 20 years later. Before the shadow disappeared, he stretched out his hand and slowly lifted it up. No matter who you are, this is my place of enlightenment. You are not allowed to blaspheme. Get out of here. As soon as Shuiying finished speaking, he dissipated immediately, but suddenly the water below trembled, and a huge water column rose up, directly sending Sudbai flying out. When it breaks out of the water, Sudbai used the last bit of strength to raise his middle finger. Grass. This is how Sudbai feels now. Then, with a crisp pop sound, Subai fell to the low-lying place beside the river. The black cat slowly walked over and circled around the half-skeleton. It seems that he is trying to determine whether this guy is dead or not. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 635. The black cat bit Subai's arm and dragged Subai to the side of the coffin. At this time, Subai seemed to have lost all his breath, and his whole person looked lifeless. When the dead energy exceeds the vitality in the body, the person is actually dead, and the immortality is basically destroyed, or it can be called the dying moment. But Subai is special. On the one hand, it is because he has a bloodline, and the bloodline has experienced several opportunities to strengthen and merge. Although the bloodline level is complicated, it is still quite high, which means that his life-sustaining ability is relatively strong. Despite his life-threatening injuries, Subai could still hold on. Even if he only had half a breath left, he could always hold on for a while longer than others. Secondly, Subai also has zombie blood. The blessings of these two bloodlines force Subai to still be alive and not die yet. There was no movement in the coffin, as if he didn't care at all, because Subai took the initiative to go to the river before. Of course, the person in the coffin knew what that river meant. It was the peak of the senior audience ready to step out. The location where Shinto left his tombstone at that step is an area semi-officially recognized by broadcasters. Subai's initiative to walk over seemed to the man in the coffin to be a sign of self-destruction. He had no interest in Su Yuhang's failed experiments, and if it hadn't been for Su Yuhang, he wouldn't have been trapped here forever. In the coffin, no matter how Subai felt about Su Yuhang, Subai was of Su Yuhang's bloodline after all. Regardless of how Subai was born, he inherited DNA similar to Su Yuhang's. The black cat is prostrate next to it. Over the past 20 years, there have been occasional high-level listeners who are about to break through and leave their own tombstones here. But high-level listeners, especially those who are about to break through to the level of high-level listeners, are not from the streets after all. Dabakay is not the tourist wave during the May Day Golden Week. Most of the time, the place is still filled with darkness and loneliness. Although the person in the coffin usually doesn't speak, the black cat will sometimes crawl beside the coffin for a while. Although there is no way to communicate, the black cat at least knows that there is a life lying in the coffin because of his presence. The black cat can also feel less lonely. After a while, the breath on Subai's body began to become weaker and weaker. The fire of life was like a candle, being left outside to be blown away by the rain and wind, and might be extinguished at any time. After all, it was Subai who took the initiative to commit suicide and walked into the river. He chose to go with the flow, and his body and mind had long been ruined. In fact, if he hadn't seen his cheap father's tombstone at the last moment, Subai's inner feelings I was touched. In addition, the man 20 years ago was so perverted that he could predict that someone would come here 20 years later and stare at his tombstone and casually cast a phantom. Maybe Subai is dead now. Was that plan implemented more than 20 years ago? Subai was not sure about this, because even the monk could not determine the exact point in time, but he probably didn't, otherwise Su Yuhang should have been able to guess where the feeling came from at that time, but it had to be said, maybe this is a kind of mistake, because of the blood relationship between Subai and Su Yuhang. Su Yuhang, who preached here more than 20 years ago, sensed an opportunity 20 years later, and then he raised his hand by accident. Otherwise, Subai would have died long ago. The black cat's paws pushed Subai's body, then placed it on the coffin and pushed it. Mean. It's already obvious. Well. A sigh came from the coffin. Didn't you want to kill him at the beginning? A voice came from inside the coffin. Humans are not grass and trees, and how can they be ruthless? Just like this black cat with vicious eyes, he will also have feelings for this silent life that has been with him for more than 20 years. Naturally, the existence in the coffin also has feelings for this silent life. This black cat has become a neighbor with whom he has a special relationship. Meow. The black cat meowed, then slowly squatted down, his eyes full of loneliness. Did you smell the scent of your playmate on him? A question came from inside the coffin. Meow. The black cat responded weakly. Actually, you really should have left here with Suyuhang. The outside world is really wonderful. The lid of the coffin slowly began to rise. Although I dislike him very much, and don't think highly of him, but I can feel his resentment towards Suyuhang. Anything that makes Suyuhang troublesome, I am willing to do it. I can only use this reason, comes to convince myself. But, he can't leave here. Extremely pure black energy began to flow out of the coffin, pouring down like water and slowly gathering around Subai. Subai's body began to gradually recover at this time, and bloodlines appeared on his bones. Is this a bloodline? The presence in the coffin seemed a little surprised. Obviously, he also had an impression of this bloodline. In recent years, apart from the young woman who came here to preach, there were also a few who left some impressions on him, except for the young woman who made him feel particularly stunning. The man who testified with grief and anger, buried his past self and his lover with a tombstone, also touched the existence in the coffin. This bloodline is clearly that person's inheritance, but now it appears on Subai's body. Bloodlines covered the bones, and with the bloodlines as veins, Subai's body began to revive again under the nourishment of corpse energy. Buzz. Subai opened his eyes suddenly. Among his eyes, the left eye was red and the right eye was jet black. The left eye represented the bloodline of the blood clan and looked very dim at this time, while the black of the right eye was radiant at this time. Great success. Ah! The existence inside the coffin did not stop the transmission of corpse energy, but continued to transmit it. Slowly, until Subai's body was completely repaired and his whole body returned to its peak condition, the presence in the coffin stopped the transmission of corpse energy, and the coffin lid was returned to its original position. Subai clenched his hands slightly, then sat up. Spreading his palms, he looked and found that his injuries had completely recovered. Subai still felt a little unreal. After all, when he was in the river just now, he was actually ready to die. But now he is alive again. He reached out and knocked on the coffin. Dong dong dong. Thanks, brother. After all, they saved him, so Subai still thanked him. There was no echo from the coffin, and it was obvious that he was too lazy to continue talking to Subai. Thank you for saving me. You have a good heart, Subai said to himself, reaching out to touch the black cat's head, but the black cat immediately took a step back. Brother, to be honest, you are different from that man and woman at this point. Subai shook his head. No wonder you were tricked here by Suyuhang. Clang. The coffin shook. Apparently, the person in the coffin heard Subai's sarcasm. Subai smiled, and did not offend this person's panic at all. As time went by, the original mystery and fear were almost worn away. Once he became familiar with it, there was nothing to be afraid of. Besides, he had just saved someone. You wouldn't want to kill yourself again by taking off your pants and farting, right? Brother, are you still continuing to enter the story world? Subai calculated with his fingers. Then you really have to be obedient and well behaved, but your mission cycle should be very long now, right? Once or twice a year. It's only twice at most. The man in the coffin did not respond again, nor was he angry. There was a long silence between the two parties. Subai was thinking about the previous scenes in the river. He had a great realization between life and death, but Subai really didn't feel that he had realized anything. He was like a guy who took too many drugs and went to the emergency room. What can you ask? Does he have any insights into life? After a long time, a voice suddenly came from inside the coffin. Do you think I'm stupid? A smile appeared on Subai's lips and he shook his head. On the contrary, I think you are very smart. There was no more talking in the coffin. Subai was silent for a while and continued, some people think they are smart, but they are mistaken for being smart. Some people look stupid, but they are actually very wise and foolish. I don't believe that my destiny is determined by my will, but I am willing to believe in the infinite vastness of broadcasting, even if it has weaknesses, even if it has aspects that are beyond its reach. Why? The being in the coffin asked. Because only under the premise of infinite broadcast, the man and the woman can become a joke in the end. Subai bluntly expressed his thoughts. There is no future. A comment came from the coffin, but then he added, same as me. Haha. Subai licked his lips, you don't know how much I hate that man and woman. Now you are not qualified to express hatred. Yes, I know, so I hope that the broadcast will be infinite, so that even if I can't catch up with them in the future, the broadcast will bring them the deepest despair at the end. Maybe, the result is different, maybe their choice is also promising. Actually, just like when I played games before, when I could easily pass a game, I would choose to deliberately restrain myself so that the game would not end so quickly and the computer would not be defeated by me so quickly, but in the end, no matter what, you can still win if you want to, and doing so will at most just add more fun to the game. If what you said is true, then those people who left tombstones in the river, they all have no meaning, but at least they have courage. Subai stood up, and all the joints in his body made a crisp sound at this moment. Brother, do you think that if one day I twist Su Yuhang's head off, will he regret that he suddenly raised his hand more than 20 years ago when he was doing nothing? It's better to say, ask him if he regrets, not shooting you into the wall. Subai. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 636. The person in the coffin, after that phone call, never made any sound again. About 10 days passed. Why is it approximate? Because the coffin does not release every day like it did in the previous half-month. A ray of corpse energy came out and was absorbed by Subai. It was probably because Subai took the initiative to walk into the river that time, so that person was too lazy to continue talking to Subai. Fortunately, although he didn't eat or drink, with his zombie physique, Subai really didn't worry that he would really die in this place. After all, this place was different from the absolute vacuum area created by broadcasting in the story world before. It's different, at least there's still plenty of corpse energy. Sitting by the river, the black cat stood on the altar and looked at Subai quietly. Although the personalities of this black cat and Ji Xiang are very different, both cats have a very high level of aloofness. In terms of life level, they are comparable to high-level listeners. They do have this kind of personality. Son. In the river, calls kept coming out, calling Subai to come over, to rejoice together, to be happy together, to be happy together, and to sink together. But after all, he had committed suicide once, just like after getting addicted, the addiction has not come back for a while, so Subai did not just walk into the river after being imprisoned for half a month like last time. Go in. Counting the days, it has been more than a month since I last entered the story world, almost 2 months, which means that it will probably not be long before I enter the next story world. The cell phone has long been out of battery, but Subai feels that the broadcast notification can still be sent through the cell phone, or, in a more beautiful way, a mummy suddenly walks out of the river. Open mouth. Listener friends, welcome to the horror radio show. I am the host of the show. I have no name because names have no meaning here. Hee hee. It's like the radio plays with the listeners as its own playthings, but while the listeners are being played to death, they also figure out the rules they know. Stretching and touching his face again, the stubble had already risen. In this place, besides the resident in the coffin and the black cat, there was no need to see anyone around, so Subai was too lazy to do so. Go take care of yourself, after all, I am not a sissy like Gongzi. Do I really have to stay here forever? Subai took a breath. It had been a month. The little guy should have returned to Shanghai by now. Unfortunately, it was the first time that he, a father, took him on a serious trip, and it ended up like this. A result. It should be almost time for the monk to reach the next story world. After getting up, Subai picked up a stone next to him and floated it towards the river. Pot, 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 pot. The stone bounced 3 times on the surface of the water before finally striking a bone. Subai jumped onto the altar and walked down. The black cat followed Subai silently. Compared with Jixiang, it indeed lacked too much spiritual energy. Perhaps Jixiang should be like this, as the one here the guardians guard this place and punish those who are not qualified but try to enter here. Subai also really admired his cheap father. How did he fool Jixiang out in the first place? Back at the coffin, Subai leaned against the coffin. At about this time every day, Subai would come back here to sleep and rest. Before going to bed, he would talk to himself and talk to the person in the coffin. After all, he had saved him once before. Well, although the reason why he was detained here and couldn't get out even if he entered the story world was because of this person, to be honest, Subai really didn't hate him that much. Maybe, I might have some Stockholm syndrome myself. Growing up, there were not many people who were kind to me. Of course, it seems now that the nanny and housekeeper when I was a child were actually just false memories. At least, I may have never experienced it. I am the only one who still has it. Brother Ninth couldn't see through it. What was the reason why he didn't open the bronze box in front of him as promised? Perhaps, with the death of Ninth brother and that cousin, the truth will never be known. But Subai still tried to think on the bright side. If you want to be less tired in life, sometimes you have to learn to make yourself happy. The man in the coffin saved him. He was not a broadcaster, nor was he a fat monk. They had a relationship of mutual use with him. Maybe it was because of this that Subai could not hate him. You say, do I really have to stay here and hang out with you? Do I have to stay here, constantly entering and exiting the story world, and can't leave until I reach the level of a boss-level audience? This was Subai's daily soliloquy before going to bed. He didn't expect to get a response from the person in the coffin. In fact, the person in the coffin didn't seem to like responding very much. Subai could feel that the black cat was a little lonely. And lonely, but the person in the coffin may really be thinking about why this evil pen is nagging again tonight. Bang dang. However, what Subai didn't expect was that the coffin actually shook at this moment. Does this guy want to chat tonight? Actually, it will be faster to practice here. I know, how can I concentrate more, but without smoking, drinking, and sightseeing, my life is really boring, Subai said straightforwardly. Do you use the attitude of, experiencing life, to be, an audience? The life of ordinary people is a kind of life, and the life of the audience is also a kind of life. Actually, there is another possibility of going out early. What is it? Subai asked. That is in the near future, if someone comes to prove. Ha, Subai laughed dryly. Big-level listeners are not tool parts on the assembly line. There are so many of them. I do know some high-level listeners who are scared to death even if they take another step forward, let alone come to testify. After all, they really want to dig a crack and get in directly, for fear that the broadcaster will take another look at them. Maybe. The coffin lid slowly floated up, and the slightly bloated figure also appeared and disappeared. Are you planning to go out for a walk? Subai asked. Do you know, why, a while ago, were you able to enter here? Subai's eyes immediately condensed, and he immediately said, it can't be because someone is coming here to preach in the near future. Haha, It's not for this reason. How could you guys get in here? But I'm curious, what kind of thing is that thing that goes to the surrounding villages to suck people's energy? Subai asked. They don't care, it's just you who cares about this issue. It's interesting. I just feel that when I enter the village, I see the rows of new tombstones, which are a bit pitiful, especially when I see the tombstones of the children. I feel a little unbearable. Maybe it's because I have also become a father in the past 2 years, and my heart seems like he is not as ruthless as before, and he has become more mother-in-law than before. That's the weapon spirit of the formation. The voice of the man in the coffin lid became more coherent than before. It was obvious that he was actively waking up from his slumber, and seemed to be planning to greet someone. Perhaps, during the more than 20 years of sleeping here, every time a high-level audience came here to preach, he would stand up to greet him. Subai didn't know why he was tricked by Su Yuhang and couldn't go out. But now it seems that he has become the guardian of this place like the black cat. Coupled with the tombstones at the bottom of the river, they are really no different from the wakers. When the formation cleans itself, it will remove impurities. The impurities give birth to instinctive intelligence and begin to absorb the energy to strengthen themselves. After you go out, you can find a monster to capture it nearby. At the level of this formation, I can also feel that even I have to be suppressed by it, so even the impurities of this formation cannot be underestimated. It can even be said to be very precious, and it is good to use it as a weapon spirit. Farewell, I'm afraid of losing my life if I use this thing as a weapon spirit. Let's do this. I'll catch it and kill it when I get out. Haha, there are really some mother-in-laws. The figure in the coffin lid stood up. Although his face could not be seen clearly, he could tell that he was an extremely wealthy middle-aged man. In addition, Subai had seen a photo of him and Su Yuhang, so he could roughly see the figure. He made up his image in his mind. It's coming. In fact, I look forward to it every time. This is probably because cowardly people are always curious about brave people. I am the cowardly person. People who can admit their cowardice are often brave, Subai said. It's almost enough to keep you for a month. The exit of the formation will be opened again soon. You have enough time to leave. Your next story world will be soon. I don't understand. If you are willing to let me leave now, why did you force me to stay a month ago? Subai was very curious about this. Because, I didn't know, you were so annoying. Actually, I am a rather aloof person, really. Subai felt the breath on his chin with some embarrassment. Maybe it's because you are a figure of the same era as Su Yuhang, and you can easily crush me to death. I just behave differently in front of you. If I remember correctly, your name is Subai, right? Subai nodded. Okay, Subai, I'm waiting to see the day when you twist off Su Yuhang's head. Boom. A loud noise came from the entrance, and the formation at the entrance was activated again, blooming with dazzling light, and a figure slowly walked out of the white light. Subai knows. This is the audience for the sermon. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 637. The formation at the entrance slowly became calm after the initial dazzling moment, and the figure of the visitor became clearer as it got closer. This is the figure of a man, with a touch of loneliness in his body. This feeling made Subai feel a little weird, because this atmosphere was very inconsistent with, or incompatible with, the temperament of the tombstones under the river. Subai had also seen the scene when Su Yuhang attained enlightenment. It was a kind of determination with a sense of indifference. The words engraved on the tombstones of other people could also show the indomitable spirit at the time of attaining enlightenment. State of mind. There are good and bad words, but the charm and character contained in the words cannot be erased. On the contrary, it can give people a more intuitive experience. However, for the man who was getting closer and closer in front of him, at least Subai didn't feel much of the aura of enlightenment in him. In fact, Subai vaguely smelled a smell of being driven to the shelf, which was a bit there is no choice but to retreat. The man in the coffin was originally standing, and seemed to be preparing to stand up to greet the distinguished guests. After all, he was half a landowner, but at this time he seemed to feel a little bored. Even if he did not lie down, he was still standing, but Subai could also feel the other person's disappointment, and the frequency of the corpse energy rolling around him could clearly show his emotional changes. It's like a movie you've been looking forward to for a long time, but the first scene makes you feel a little off-putting. The greater your expectations, the greater your disappointment. When the opponent's figure was fully revealed and clearly seen, Subai shook his head subconsciously. It's actually him. Also, no wonder. Liang Sen was wearing a casual short shirt and a pair of jeans. Of course he looked very casual, but his attitude also seemed a bit casual. Ji Zhen once invited Subai to help him go to Liang Sen's villa to unseal his sealed clone. Now it seems that although he is not here, Xie Zhen still found Fatty and others to get this done. And therefore, Liang Sen had to come here to preach. This location. This area. It should probably be a broadcast notification, right? Otherwise, it is impossible for every high-level audience to come here at the same time. This is actually a semi-official organization recognized by broadcasting, and it is an office set up by broadcasting in the real world. Serving here and leaving your own tombstone is similar to going to the relevant department to get a seal. It is a necessary formality and a very important process. Subai naturally doesn't understand the meaning of this process now, but Subai believes that one day he will know it because of his improvement in strength. Now, he is far from that level, so naturally he doesn't know that level. Things and rules. When Liang Sen saw Subai standing beside the coffin, he was slightly surprised and said, "Why are you here?" "Yes, why are you here? How could you be here?" Subai replied calmly, "I'm here for a trip." This was indeed the truth. He. Liang Sen laughed. The meaning of this laughter is self-evident. Is it possible for a senior person to travel to this place? But soon, Liang Sen stopped laughing. He probably could crush Subai in terms of strength, but under this situation, he couldn't continue to be strong. "Welcome." The being in the coffin said these two words, a bit perfunctory, a bit official, and even a little bit disdainful in his tone. Liang Sen nodded to him, "Nice to meet you." Click. The being in the coffin lay back, and all the corpse energy was collected and entered the coffin. The coffin lid was slowly reset, without missing a beat. Thinking about it, after the man in the coffin performed his duty in a perfunctory manner, he was too lazy to watch the next scene. The beginning showed the process, although the ending should be a given. Generally speaking, coming here to preach is just a kind of recognition from the broadcast, and there is no such thing as failure. The black cat was hidden in the darkness, staring at Liang Sen with a pair of amber eyes, but Liang Sen was not afraid at all. After all, he was not the dozen senior listeners who came a month ago. His current strength was in the clone. After being unblocked, he has reached the peak of advanced audience. It seems that the solution was successful. Subai looked at Liang Sen and said, "The person I love the most hurts me the most." Liang Sen had a look of helplessness on his face. "Oh, I can't really tell. I've been waiting for him to help me make this decision. They really love each other and kill each other." Subai pointed to the altar hidden in the darkness behind him. "I will lead you." Liang Sen stretched out his hand and grabbed Subai's shoulder. Immediately, the surrounding environment was distorted. The next moment, Liang Sen and Subai appeared at the top of the altar. In front of them, there was the desk with the gold seal of the Dian Kingdom. "If you want to observe, just say so." No other audience would dare to think about this opportunity. Liang Sen looked very indifferent. Since you and I have been neighbors, it proves that we are indeed destined. This is a bargain. You can take it? Subai touched the tip of his nose awkwardly and said, I'm afraid of being embarrassed later. Awkward, Liang Sen shook his head, there is nothing embarrassing. When you find that you have no way out, you have no other choice but to move forward, whether it is forced or active, there is actually no difference. Do you want me to take my mobile phone and play the BGM of Men Should Be Self-Strengthening next to me, and then write the 4 words Go Forward indomitably on my face? That's right, Subai agreed. If leaving tombstones and preaching were just a process and a formality, Liang Sen did not need to feel too much pressure, so he simply admitted and expressed his attitude that he had to come despite his inner resistance. Liang Sen's figure slowly floated towards the river. Subai stood on the altar, and a black cat appeared next to Subai. For so many years, this black cat was usually the audience for every sermon. Maybe 20 years ago, there was a black cat who was also an audience. It was crawling here, but now it is the only one left. Liang Sen floated on the river bank, holding his hands open. The water surface of the river also split, revealing the unknown bottom in the middle. Tombstones were arranged in a serpentine shape at the bottom. There were dozens of them as far as the eye could see. There were obviously areas invisible behind. Liang Sen's eyes wandered around the tombstones below. Soon, he found the one he was looking for. That tombstone was different from the other tombstones. It was not written in the format of the tomb of so-and-so, but simply wrote the word lychee. 2 simple words, but showing a kind of domineering attitude. This feeling appears on a woman's tombstone, and even her limelight and brilliance suppress the tombstones in front and behind her. Well, although I have to come here, I have actually thought about it for a long time. After coming here, what I want to do most is to see you. Liang Sen's eyes showed infatuation. His feelings for lychee were actually clearly shown very early on. Once upon a time, the 2 of them were listeners at the same time. The 2 of them had plotted against each other and faced life and death together, whether in the real world or in the story. In the world, they have cooperated, but I don't know when, that woman began to gradually pull away from him, and both parties distanced themselves at an incredible speed in terms of strength and status. Now, that woman has gone to that place long ago and has not returned yet, and she has not yet left her own tombstone here. Perhaps, you were right at the beginning. I have all the talents, but after all, I lack the confidence to become a strong person. Liang Sen muttered to himself, looking at Lizzie's tombstone, as if he were seeing Lizzie himself. Opening his palms, the jade box on the desk was immediately opened. The golden seal of the Dian kingdom soared up and landed steadily on Liang Senator. He held the gold seal and pointed to the side of the wall. Boom! A piece of stone was peeled off from the wall by the traction of the golden seal, and in the process, it gradually carved itself into the shape of a tombstone. The tombstone floated in front of Liang Sen. It is said to be a sermon, but what is left is a tombstone, so naturally something must be buried. Liang Sen closed his eyes, seeming to be thinking or hesitating. Subai was sitting cross-legged on the altar, and the black cat was very close to him. Others bury the past, but Liang Sen buries the most sincere love in his heart today. Today, I, Liang Sen, have attained enlightenment here and buried my love and affection for you. From now on, you will no longer exist in my heart. My tombstone will stand alongside yours. Liang Sen kept swiping his fingers, and the word Liang Sen appeared on the tombstone. Immediately, Liang Sen pressed down his palm, and the gold seal of the Dian kingdom in his hand flew back to its original position and entered the jade box. The jade box also closes immediately. The tombstone with the word Liang Sen engraved on it fell down next to Lichee's tombstone. Liang Sen's eyes also showed a kind of relief and self-emptiness. He had never wanted to take this step in the first place. Now that things have happened, he has been forced for more reasons. But now that he is here, even if it is just a formality, he will always live up to what he wants in his heart. However, when Liang Sen's tombstone had just been put down, a sudden change occurred. Boom! Li Qi's tombstone suddenly floated and actually hit Liang Sen's tombstone. After a roar, Liang Sen's tombstone immediately broke into pieces and exploded, while Li Qi's tombstone stood back on the same spot. You deserve it too. A woman's voice came from the tombstone, which was the thought left by Li Qi back then. A stream of blood overflowed from the corner of Liang Sen's mouth, and his soul was hurt. Subai laughed out loud. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 638. Liang Sen's expression looked very depressed, but he was not angry or hysterical. On the contrary, he took a deep breath and waved his left hand again, and the golden seal of the Dian kingdom that had returned to the jade box floated again. It flew out and landed on his palm, but this time, it was obviously a little hotter than the last time. Standing on the altar, Subai could clearly see that Liang Sen's palms were turning red. Thinking back to the time when Tang Zhenqiu was crazy, he picked up the Dian Kingdom's golden seal with a fan and picked it up through a jade box. It melted into pus, which is enough to show the domineering nature of this Dian Kingdom's golden seal. Even the most advanced listeners have to endure a lot of pain and pressure when they master him. At the moment, Liang Sen had no choice but to do it, because the first time his tombstone was directly shattered by Li Qi's tombstone, then he had to do it again. Subai didn't know if this process of enlightenment was really mandatory, but thinking about Liang Sen's previous disgust and fear of this matter, it may be that he was tricked by Ji Zhen into breaking the seal and causing the broadcast. Maybe there is more of a forced look in it. Therefore, Liang Sen must leave his tombstone here, complete the process of enlightenment, and seal this chapter. Subai had said before that he was afraid of being embarrassed, but he never expected that it would be so embarrassing. Every tombstone should embody the owner's will. It's not that Li Ji deliberately targeted Liang Sen, but the will left by Li Ji is not willing to have anyone sit shoulder to shoulder with him. In addition, it is obvious that Li Ji's will is particularly strong. His will is much stronger than Liang Sen's, so there was a scene where Liang Sen's tombstone was instantly shattered by Li Qi's tombstone. The first tombstone is broken, and the feelings that have been lingering in my heart since I met you have come to an end. I, Liang Sen, am now preaching for the second time. Keep passing by. Don't ask for the future. Not knowing the present moment. No extravagant fantasies. It just proves that helplessness. Involved by the golden seal of the Dian Kingdom, another piece of stone was peeled off from the rock wall, but this time the stone was smaller, and the degenerated tombstone was only 1/3 the size of the other tombstones, making it look a bit shabby. But Liang Sen didn't care at all and flicked the Dian Kingdom's golden seal away, and the golden seal returned to the jade box. The short tombstone was placed in an unknown place at the bottom of the river very casually by Liang Senator. Compared with the other tombstones, it looked so inconspicuous, and also revealed a kind of helplessness and silent resistance. At this moment, Subai no longer had any contempt for Liang Sen in his heart. Perhaps, everyone has their own persistence, and everyone also has their own awe. Being able to face the cowardice and fear in my heart, and persist in my cowardice and fear, while facing it honestly and not choosing to let go, there is a kind of great freedom in it. This is not a place to speak under the national flag, nor is it a speech in a report meeting. There is no need to make false claims and shout slogans. Some people may choose to bury their weaknesses, but they can still retain their weaknesses at this time. From a negative perspective, it is also a kind of self-persistence. Liang Sen's figure slowly landed on the altar, and the river below returned to its original state. The bones continued to float in the river, as if nothing had changed. It's a joke. Liang Sen reached out and took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. He took one out, bit it in his mouth, and handed another one to Subai. I think it's pretty good, Sudbai said seriously. It feels like you're truly preaching only after your second sermon. Ah. Liang Sen lit up the cigarette, and his figure disappeared. He was about to leave. He gave Sudbai a cigarette, just to express his gratitude to the only audience, but this did not mean that Liang Sen was willing to have any friendship with Sudbai. Just like Sudbai would not cheat with Hu Tianhai, a low-level listener, for no apparent reason. It is indeed difficult to establish friendship among people who are not in the same circle. The two parties do not even have a common language. This is not only true in the audience circle, but also in all walks of life in the real world. Sudbai followed the black cat from the altar to the coffin, and saw Liang Sen standing beside the coffin. Go well. The person in the coffin made a farewell sound, which seemed to be more serious than at the beginning. Perhaps the person in the coffin also sensed Liang Sen's state of mind when he preached for the second time, although it was not vigorous. Even seemed a lot more angry than Ziajiazi, and could not compare with those talented and confident audience members, but it also had its own flavor, which was commendable. Goodbye. Liang Sen also said goodbye to the person in the coffin, and disappeared again. At this time, the light at the entrance gradually began to weaken, and it might only last for less than 10 minutes. Sudbai knelt down and looked at the black cat. Would you like to go out with me? Your other companion lives with me. If you can take this black cat out like Su Yuhang did, then you will be taking out a huge fortune. If both cats live in your own home, you can say that you have gained it in terms of security and other aspects. A huge improvement. However, the black cat just silently crawled down beside the coffin, silent, closing its eyes, as if taking a rest, but this gesture was already an answer to Sudbai's invitation. It doesn't want to leave. It is here to stay. Sudbai smiled sadly, and yes, if this cat was willing to leave here, it would have left with Jixiang and Su Yuhang long ago. Perhaps, it is very different from Jixiang, and perhaps, the cat back then Jixiang chose Su Yuhang, and this black cat chose the man in the coffin. Everyone has their own choice. Well, this sentence can also be applied to cats. The man in the coffin let out a sigh. Apparently he knew that if the black cat could follow Sudbai out of here, he would be able to see more wonderful things. But perhaps, from his inner point of view, he seemed to be used to being in the coffin. It feels like having this black cat by your side during these long years. Sudbai stretched out his hand and patted the coffin gently. Brother, I'll come see you next time when I come to preach. Whatever you want to eat or drink, you can tell me now and I'll bring it to you next time. The man in the coffin did not respond to this question. Sudbai shrugged and walked towards the bright exit. When the whole person was submerged, his body began to twist. This was a kind of transmission similar to the broadcast into the story world. After a while, Sudbai's figure disappeared there. The light at the entrance also gradually extinguished, completely returning to calm, and the darkness here was restored again. It seems that darkness is the essence and main color here. Meow. The cat meowed, then said nothing. Huh, huh. Sudbai didn't expect that when he came out, he would actually be in the Erhai Lake. After the whole person surfaced, he subconsciously took a big breath. It was not because he almost drowned before, but because compared to the tomb of the living dead, the place here now breathing is the most comfortable and refreshing thing. It was late at night, and the sky was full of stars, which looked very bright. If the weather is good in Dali, the starry sky is indeed beautiful. Looking around, Sudbai roughly distinguished his position, and then swam towards the Kayakan pier. Erhai Lake is not very big in fact. After all, it is not a real sea. In just 10 minutes, Sudbai landed at the pier of Cai village. Dragging his soaked body, Sudbai walked towards the inn first. Although he felt that the monk should have brought the little guy back to Shanghai, Sudbai had to go and confirm. Before he could reach the inn, a figure appeared in front of Sudbai. Apparently, Subai didn't hide his aura and was caught by the other party. "You're back," the other party said. "Lord Buddha, why are you here?" Subai said in surprise. "Chi Lu asked me to come here before entering the story world. Your son refused to follow Chi Lu back to Shanghai first, so I came over to take a look. I have been living here for a week." "That's good. After all, he is also your godson." Thinking that the little guy was still here, Subai felt a lot warmer in his heart. "By the way, something happened during the day," Gyatso said. "A senior man died in the reed marsh in front." "He must be a senior man." "Another senior person died," Subai wondered for a moment. "Where is the body?" "I took care of the body and placed it under the reeds." "I thought it was you who had returned." "Okay, let's go see the body first. Maybe I still recognize him." The reed swamp was actually only 100 meters away from here, and the two of them arrived in a short time. When Gyatso lifted up the layer of mud, what Subai saw was Yaozhe, who was already a little swollen. "He must have been poisoned to death," Gyatso analyzed. "You can tell by looking at his skin color." Subai stretched out his hand and touched Yaozhe's body, and then felt that Yaozhe's belly was a little bloated. He immediately slapped Yaozhe's belly with Subai's palm. Now that Yaozhe is dead, he naturally no longer has the magical powers of a senior person. Subai can do whatever he wants. Hiss, hiss. A colorful poisonous snake coiled in Yaozhe's belly, swallowing the letter. Gyatso's face immediately darkened. When he found the corpse before, he didn't even check that there was a snake in the belly of the corpse. The problem is that the snake can't detect the slightest breath at all. Even if it appears in front of you now, it's like he can't sense its presence. The poisonous snake seemed to be intimidated by the auras of Subai and Gyatso, and seemed a little aggrieved. It curled up and trembled, and looked pitiful. But Subai punched out directly at this time. Boom! The snake's body was immediately torn apart, and a deep pit was made under its feet. The huge roar caused all the rooms in the surrounding inn to light up.